Let's bring the chat back in, shall we? There we go. Um, your day shows are so refreshing. I'm glad. Again, it's hard not to dive right into the news of the day. And I saw, was it on Reuters? I think so. There was an article this morning, chat room, about why people feel tired all the time right now. And I certainly have my days where I'm like bizarrely exhausted for no reason. And but mine are fewer and farther between than the average person apparently who deals with this. And apparently the medical community's general opinion on this is that we have replaced excitement with anxiousness. That it's fails you're saying, I think it's mass depression. Effectively, it is anxiety caused by overwhelm. Yeah, you're overwhelmed by the stressors in your life. Now, let me explain something to you. None of those stressors are direct. We all have direct stressors in our life. A relative or a friend is ill or dies, or, driving in traffic, dealing with work challenges, familial issues. That you have let's just say, I don't know, you have a foster kitten with a runny butt. Those kind of stressors are legitimate and you have them all the time. And they come and go with the timing of your life. You transition through them. All emotions last about 17 seconds. And you have to redecide that you're still sad, you're still sad, you're still sad, you're still sad, or have it presented to you in a way that reminds you that you're sad over and over and over again to stay sad. How should more people be helping their neighbors? Very possibly. It depends on your neighbor, I suppose. But the important thing is, and this is from my experience, chat room, and I'm curious what you guys would think, is that not only is there more anxiety around, more things to be anxious about in because of social media, and you're constantly getting it. And that's why with my show, I try to alleviate some of that from you. When it's a real problem, you deal with a real problem. When it's not, I do not allow it to make me anxious at all, and I make fun of it. Comedy is one of the ways that we mock those things that would make us anxious and therefore freeze us and make us incapable of coming to a solution. And so I do not and will not allow those things to overwhelm me, because you got to have something in the tank for a real situation, right? If there's real problems in your life, you have to be able to respond to them. And if you're, I've always joked about that. I want to do a comedy zombie film, the shortest zombie film ever made, called the Day of the Dead, Leg Day of the Dead, essentially. Leg Day of the Dead. So the day, you do leg day and you come out of the gym, you're like, oh my God, I could barely walk to the car. And that's the day a zombie apocalypse happens and you can't outrun them and you're just dead. Like that, somebody in Day of the Dead had leg day of the dead, and just, they would have been healthy. They would have been able to survive a zombie apocalypse under normal situations, but their legs were overwhelmed, right? Well, that's where a lot of the online anxiety stuff is. And I am pleading with you guys to look at the stressors that show up in your feed, and you don't have to ignore them. It's almost impossible to. You need to start retaining your strength around those kind of things. And I think not only, this is my own personal view, is that not only is there an increased number of just sort of low-level anxiety stressors that people come in contact with, that went from the evening news used to be on 6 o'clock to a 24-hour news cycle to social media's 24 hours a day on top of that. So some people are doom scrolling the internet while watching a bad news story, so that you get this feeling that, like, if you looked out the window, that it would be a zombie apocalypse, and it's just frankly not. And so you see people starting to lose their minds, even the anti-maxxers throwing over masks in stores and stuff. They're doing the exact same thing. This is what this looks like. And so what I would plead to you to do is not only recognize that some of the stuff that makes you anxious has no power over you, and there's no value in worrying about it. You need to attack it like a problem. You don't have to ignore it, because telling you to ignore it is impossible. What you need to do is, when you see something and you feel it making you anxious, going, what would solve this? What's two things? What's okay? That's the solution everybody's coming up with. What's my solution for it? What would I do? And then that will start to get you into a solution mode and out of the fear and reaction mode. Okay, that's how you handle stressors in real life. You just do a smaller version of it online. Okay. The other thing is that people need to stop taking pride in their anxiety online. There was a big thing like around the election last year and some other stuff, where people were talking about how exhausted they were. They were saying it, and then a lot of people were saying, I'm exhausted, and they go, yeah, and you would get a lot of reinforcement for how exhausted you presented yourself to the world, and therefore you're getting positive reinforcement for how overwhelmed you are, and then there's no way to get out of it. There just isn't, because now a part of your sense of worth is coming from how anxious and overwhelmed you are. And on the left, there's a huge amount of that. And I see it all the time. And those who've been following me on Twitter for a long time, have seen several times, where I've tweeted, like, you don't get extra points for how overwhelmed and anxious or exhausted you are. Don't tweet about it. It doesn't mean hiding your feelings. Just share them with the people who actually matter. If you have loved ones, if you're alone and your only people, let's say you're just at home and your only friends are online, then only pick a few of them and go, this is making me anxious. What do you do? Ask for their feedback. Don't just blurt that you're overwhelmed, because then you're looking for them going, I know, I understand. Your support of your anxiety is not what you're looking for. Solution to your anxiety is what you're looking for. You really are. Yeah, Chip says step away from the echo loop, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You do need that space, but you also need the skills to be able to mentally step away from that when you're engaged with it. You know what I mean? You can't just go, I only feel good when I turn off the news or put down my phone, and then knowing full well that you're going to turn your phone back on and pick it up, and you're going to turn the news back on, you're going to see it, and then you're at the whim of some other person. You can't build a schedule for your life around that. I know I'm going to feel like shit from 8 until about 10:30 in the morning watching the news, and then in the afternoons when I get home from work, when I check in on shit, and then I'm going to feel like shit when I doom scroll before bedtime. It's ridiculous. You have to claim your strength in the face of those things as well. Yes, taking a break is valuable, but you also need to know and be aware of that you have the skills to deal with stuff when it's right in front of you. And one of those things is being able to tell the difference between the things you can actually help. Our dear friend Charlene May, who we love and who opened for me on the road many, many times, her father just passed away from COVID. I've been messaging her, and people have been talking to her back and forth on Facebook and other places, trying to reach out to her, let her know that if she needs anything, we're there for her. That's a real stressor. And there are tiers of it when you don't want to, overwhelm them. Maybe they're in the middle of something, they're far away. There's stress that's involved in how much you engage, how much you give, how much can be overwhelming. And we all deal with that. That's real. Okay. You need that to be real. You need to consider those things. Those are legitimate concerns. But when you turn them into worries, or you externalize that level of worry, concern on a real situation that you're dealing with, externally to random video you saw on the internet that people are retweeting about something that's horrible, that in a couple of days you're going to find out, by the way, isn't what you thought it was. And then you're going to have the stress of going, oh, that wasn't real, sorry. You need to be able to develop the skills to separate those two. You need to, having your self-worth tied up in your interpersonal relationships is valuable, okay? How you treat the people in your life and how they respond to how you treat them is ethically very important. It guides you in your life. It shows you when you're doing right and when you're doing wrong, because you can one-to-one check all the boxes and understand that you're involved in this situation, and you know that there are no outside or secondary things, or maybe you'll find out if you ask, that are causing whatever the problem or the grating is between you and your loved one or your friend, right? or your coworker. Those are things you can actually be involved in. There are, in the internet world and in the world of news, there are an infinite number of externalities that you have no participation in. And so you have to recognize at a certain point that you have to have a certain level of stoicism, a certain level of stiff arming those things. Sorry, whoops, my the computer went to sleep. It will be back in a second. There we go. Wake up. There we go. So what happens when I get on a ramble? Yeah, it won't give me a signal now, so I gotta. It's too crucial. You cannot give yourself over to something that has an infinite void attached to it. You are throwing your emotional worth down stuff, and even causes you believe in. You have to recognize this is a cause I feel deeply about. This is, whether it's fostering pets or BLM or whatever it is, you have to recognize that this is something I care about. However, there's only so much I can do. And so I will weigh my worth in this circumstance based on that reality, not on, oh my God, it's everywhere. And because there are so many more externalities that you interact with, you have a responsibility to recognize things that make you anxious, that are stacking, because anxiety makes you useless in an emergency. And so you need to seek to get rid of your anxieties about certain things proactively, so that you, who are a decent, caring person, otherwise you wouldn't be anxious about this shit in the first place, are useful in the circumstance. Does that make sense to everybody? You have a responsibility in the world that you consider important. And that's why you're online. It's why you hashtag things, and it's why you retweet things, and it's why you post things, and it's why you volunteer, it's why you march, it's why you do those things. But if you can't mitigate your emotional involvement in those things, you may do more harm than good to the very thing you're trying to help, and you may wear yourself out and not be of use to anyone right about the time you would have had the best idea that might have actually fixed the situation. But too many times, in an attempt to be sympathetic to people who are anxious, we take away their personal responsibility in it. Because you already feel like you have pressures, so I don't put the pressure of, well, it's your fault, right? That fault is there, not responsibility. And because people, I think, muck them up. They mix up the fault part with the responsibility part as if they're, the same zone. And they aren't. They are wholly different emotional responses to something. If something's your fault, then you, through negligence on purpose, cause that thing. If it's your responsibility, then, you've either chosen it to be your responsibility or it is naturally your responsibility. And you either have the ability to respond or you don't. If it is your responsibility, somewhere in you have the ability to deal with it. How you deal with it and the depth of how you deal with it is the question. And most people think, it seems like right now, there's a shit ton of people who think that the best way to deal with stuff is to show how anxious and overwhelmed you are. Tell everybody, oh my God, this is terrible. Oh, these people, it's the end of the end of the end. Be a part of the doom scrolling to show that you recognize that something is bad. And it's not helpful. And it'll make you sick. And there's a lot of support right now for showing that you're anxious and upset and overwhelmed. And that's not healthy. And I'm not rushing out. I'm not telling everybody in my chat room to rush out and tell everybody, stop being so exhausted, you wuss, stand up, blah, blah, blah. But in yourself, if you can reflect that calm, if you can reflect that ability to digest true, interactive, worrisome events in life with the sort of governmental, societal, social distanced stuff on the other hand, you need to live that ability to separate those things. in your life. And when you do that, people will see that. People will see that in you. They will see that you're not overwhelmed by these things. And I get asked all the time, isn't it exhausting? Isn't it da-da-da-da? And frankly, it is not. Because and not through magic, I cultivate in myself on the regular, and I'm aware, it's a constant gardening exercise, the difference between the worrisome parts of life that just exist, that I have an integral material connection to, that I can and will do something about within the limits of my ability and the limits of the priority against other things, and the overall societal concerns and what the level of good I can do to create positive change and growth. And those things require me to not get exhausted by them. It requires me to manage an anxious response. If I want to be worth a goddamn in any of the areas that socially and politically I care about, I can't be overwhelmed. It's not going to help. And life gives you enough overwhelming stuff on its own without stacking a bunch of crap from that strangers toss your way on the internet. Not going to do it. I'm not going to. I refuse. And I also will say that many of you will see that the amount of time that I put into, my show, put into talking about, like, researching the topics I talk about, pushing back, against the lies that I see, doing the show the way I do my show, no one can ever accuse me of not being committed and focused on solutions and being helpful, right? You can see it. I materially put that effort in. You can see it. And so when and that work is only possible because I refuse to let external things make me anxious. It's not that help me manage my external, I don't even think about it that way. Those things have no right to my emotional well-being. None. And I wish this was I wish this was easier to convey to people, in a way that they could absorb it and put it into a practical sense. But as we associate our emotional responses to things with the validity of our caring, and that's, by the way, how the news manipulates you. Get somebody upset. Scared will always make you tune in. Angry is second best. Anger is always is based on loss. If you know this, anger is based on loss. If you're ever angry, it's based on the concept of loss. You are losing time. You are losing face. You are losing material goods. You are angry about that loss because if you have one car and someone dents it or flattens a tire and you can't get to work, you're going to lose your job, whatever, that makes you very angry. If you have 35 cars and 10 jobs you could be doing and you could probably work from home, it's nothing. It's a matter of that scale, right? But right now on the internet, there's a wave of people showing how much they care by how anxious they are, by how overwhelmed, by how upset they are. I'm upset, therefore I'm a good person. And they do it too. They're right on that. They're angry for a living. Tyranny. It's tyranny, right? And that's where they're getting it. Anger, and by the way, they're depressed. So getting out of depression requires anger. And then anger is, you can move out of that into some sense of self-worth. And because that's anger is the retention of self-worth after you've been depressed. And then you could be kind of back to feeling good. That you don't get out of depression without getting mad first. It's just there's an emotional ladder. It just works that way in my experience. But what I would say to everybody in my chat room, trolls and all, is the real life challenges that come into your life are far too important for you to give yourself away to secondary anxious storylines that are meant to emotionally manipulate you into watching a show or buying a product. And all of that, it's not just your responsibility. You have the ability to respond to it. And I don't know who told you you don't. I don't know why this seems to be a point of pride with some folks, that there are things that are outside my control. Yeah, there are. This ain't one of them. The things that are making you anxious, the things that are making you stressed, especially when they come from socio-political things, are completely within your control. You have made a decision about what they mean, and that meaning is making you anxious. If you make a different decision about them, you will not have the same response. Therefore, it is within your ability to respond. And anything that is outside, I'll end on this because I got to get going, and so do you guys. In my understanding of sort of Stoic philosophy, most of what you'll hear about Stoic or focus-based philosophies, especially in the business community or in the work community, as far as, people trying to develop or create, or, writers or people who program things, what their thing is that they need to take everything that isn't in this circle that they're trying to work on and put it to the outside. And, move it to the outside so they stay focused on this one thing, right? So they can get a job done. And so most of the talk you hear about that is because someone has a singular focus. This isn't about how you run a life. This is about how you get a piece of software online. So a lot of the conversations about like the one thing and these ideas in business have all been about Stoic control, about your locus of control is this circle. And taking the things, I guess technically, taking the things, you need to do them and putting them in that and only focusing on that thing. My adventure in sort of Stoic philosophy, and maybe this is a Sparksism in its own way. Maybe this is Sparksism and not Stoicism. But there is work in constantly gardening the things, pulling the weeds in your locus of control, putting stuff, recognizing that you are taking things from the outside that you have no control over and putting them in there as if they actually exist within the circle, as if they actually exist within your locus of control. You are creating that illusion. That thing worries me. Therefore, I have some responsibility to it. And here it is, this giant egg in the middle of my situation. And I put it there. My constant gardening is not about like working on that little thing, but remembering that not only do I have a responsibility not to get anxious or upset about things that are outside of my control, it's a duty. It's beyond just, it's probably better for me, is that not only are those things, should I not worry about those things, but those things cannot eat up any of my brain pan. They cannot eat up any of my focus, because it wouldn't help if they did. And that is they eat up limited bandwidth on the stuff that matters in my life. And then something will come along that matters. A friend needs to have a conversation. A kid's lost in the neighborhood. Some sort of like, there's a storm coming physically in the world, and we've got to, I've got to drive, to LA, and there's a huge storm and it's going to be rainy and all that. Like, these are things that being exhausted and anxious about things that I have absolutely no control over, not only are a waste of my mental and emotional space, but could put me in danger, could actually take my eye off the ball in that regard. Does that make sense? It goes beyond just like, I shouldn't worry about those things. I shouldn't worry about it. And even then, that puts it inside. I shouldn't worry about those things. Now that's on me. I shouldn't worry. No, I have a responsibility. I'm not saying duty twice. You guys reacted in the chat. I have a responsibility, an ethical and moral responsibility, to recognize things that are outside of my realm of control, and not only not get emotionally invested in them, but to wholly ignore their negative impact on my life and smile through them because of that. You know why? Because there's too many things inside my area of control that I can work on. And this will take my power away. It will take my, if I'm too concerned, it's like when I'm doing the show and there's tech issues or whatever. Some of the tech issues, when they're outside of my control, I wouldn't even worry about them. Like because like this morning, the internet was blinking in and out. Once I recognized it was outside of my realm of control and I stopped worrying about my computer or my own personal internet, then it just became funny. It's crucial. And I'm telling you, even if you're a troll, even if you're a maggot and you just come here and you're grinding, you're upset and you hate me because you think that my liberal policies want to turn the country into, a Marxist dystopia or something. Even if you come here to hate watch, here's what I want you to do. I want you to recognize, take a look at the things in your life that are within your control. And some of that is political. You can vote, you can hashtag things, you can show your support for ideas, that kind of stuff. But once it's outside of that realm that you've done your part, you can't quit your job and go, storm the Capitol every weekend. It's not going to happen. Get to work. Get on your own life. That's inside your circle of control. You can actually do that. And be the best inside that circle that you possibly can. And anything that's outside that circle is none of your goddamn business. And it is toxic to assume it is. And you are poisoning yourself with an idea if you think it is. Tell me to get banned yet. I don't want you carrying around any secondary anxiety, no matter what side of the political aisle you're on. Because I would rather have a conversation with somebody who disagrees with me politically that can put their thoughts together and isn't just screaming and spitting and freaking out and overwhelmed and clearly in a mass anxious depression. And I think a lot of those folks and a lot of our folks spend way too much time on the things outside their circle and way too little time on the things inside their circle. So I would, as you doom scroll today, I don't want you to go, okay, oh, it's a lot of bad news. Oh, it's terrible. That thing that happened is terrible. I don't want you to process things like that. I want you to process them like someone is expecting you to respond to it in the best way possible. What's the best way I could respond to this? Some of it might be genuine sadness that you feel, and that's real. Some of it might be, all right, everybody's mad about this. What do they think the problem is? Why is there an impasse? Is it because they think there's only 2 solutions? What might be 10 other solutions? Maybe I make a list. Maybe I start posting, here's 10 ideas that, we could do instead of this. Instead of open borders and instead of closing borders, there's maybe there's a strategy in this. And you'll find, by the way, that a lot of folks are already working on that outside, your locus of control, that are already in process doing that. You'll find that there's a lot of people doing those very same things that are being solution oriented. And then you'll go, oh, okay, I always thought, because the news was telling me, that there's no one working on these things. And there certainly is. Every morning, I'm telling you, billions, multiple billions, like half the Earth's population gets up every morning and tries to make the world a better place. Nurses, doctors, scientists, educators, teachers, politicians, plumbers get up every morning like, all right, how do I make the world slightly better today? Maybe I can be a little faster on my job so that, it can be cheaper for me and less expensive for my customers, blah, blah, blah. All those things, they all add up. And every day, billions of people wake up and try to do that. Be a part of that. That's just my little piece of advice. That's just me, this is kind of, maybe this is the value of the morning show ultimately. But in my corner, in my area, and amongst the Sparksists, you don't get points for being overwhelmed and exhausted. You're just not going to. I'll feel bad for you if you genuinely are. but we got to get past it. We got to get you over it so that because you obviously care. If you're anxious and upset, you obviously care. And that caring is better used coming up with solutions or helping solve it, as opposed to, oh God, aren't I so upset? Isn't everyone so happy with me? I'm so upset how people are being treated in the world. You can do that elsewhere. There's plenty of room for it. There's lots of areas you can go on the internet where you'll find Facebook groups and chat rooms and stuff where they'll support that kind of behavior, and you'll see it. You'll see it now. Now that I've mentioned it, you'll see it, and you'll go, oh, I was getting caught up in that. I was giving someone else the reins to my emotional well-being, and you can't do it. Not just for you, but for the people who really matter in your life. So that when those inevitable, real stressful moments come, when those moments where your world seems to crash down because you've lost a friend, out of nowhere, or someone gets sick or injured or whatever, you have something left in the tank for that situation. That's your responsibility. And if you're letting these external things get you exhausted, then you're shirking that responsibility to the people you truly love. There you go. And this is me, showing you how to do it and stay on social media, because it's how you digest stuff. It's not that you see it. It's how you see it that matters. All right, I'll let you guys go. I will see you this afternoon at the regular time at 3 p.m. Pacific time. God willing, moon in Pisces or Mercury in retrograde this morning. Jesus. Hopefully I might even be on a little early just to make sure we're up and running at some point, because it seemed to be okay. Well, I'm glad, Christine. Some people just need a new philosophy. Anyways, I adore you guys, and it worries me. That's the one thing that I feel like is inside my worry zone that I can worry about, is that I want my audience that watches this show to go out when they're experiencing all this stuff and be the most useful, helpful, creative, abundant, happy, supportive, loving people that get involved in charities and stuff like that, and don't collapse, don't get overwhelmed. I want that for you guys. I want you guys to be the person who can handle tough stuff with steady resolve and a quiet smile. You know what I mean? And this is from the guy who's done CPR multiple times on total strangers and watched crowds of people, many of whom who probably have taken CPR classes, run away. You want to be that person. You want to be that person. And the way you do that is take your power back from these situations. Okay, I'll let you guys go. This is turning into another Midwestern goodbye. I adore you guys. Thank you for letting me rant about that and espouse that, because it's something I care a lot about.